Well, hey everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. Today we're going to be going over putting your data team to work on LLM products. I promise that it's going to be the second best talk about AI at Coalesce by a Miller today. So how many managers, PMs, senior engineers do we have in the room today? OK, great, quite a few. So it's 2025 planning season, and you're likely getting together some strategic documents to present to your executive or senior leadership team about what data should be doing in 2025, and maybe more importantly, what type of resourcing you should sustain or increase in order to make that happen. Now, a lot of data teams don't really have a seat at the leadership table, and so these conversations can sometimes be a bit rough. So let's play a quick planning game. You present to your CEO 3 doors, and you ask them to walk through one of them. Behind door number 1 is a data quality initiative that promises to answer all of those pestering questions that the chief revenue officer has about the data just looks wrong. Behind door number 2 is a new dashboard for the executive team filled with source of truth KPIs to help the executive team and senior leadership make better decisions about the business. And behind door number 3 is a client-facing AI product that promises to drive some revenue for the company. Now, I don't know about your CEO, but Spike, Newfront CEO, is sprinting through door number 3, and he's not even opening it first. Why is that? Now, I bet there's a few Gen AI skeptics in the room here today, but what I'm going to be telling you is that there are client-facing, impact-driving AI products for you to go out and build, and you should be the ones getting involved in doing so as well. And that's not just because AI is a shiny object, but it gets executives excited because it helps reorient the way the data team is seen, from being just a cost center to also being a profit center. You're no longer just going to be proposing initiatives like decision support, which you are already doing and is very fruitful. But in a tight market, it's really hard to justify investment in something that is not showing dollar signs. And that is what Gen AI products can help you propose. And just so that it's clear, this isn't just a fictional example. This is pretty much how our 2024 planning at Newfront went. And I expect it to be pretty similar for 2025. So what I'm hoping for you to get away from this talk is a couple lessons that I've learned for the last year and a half or so living in this Gen AI world. One is why you should be working on Gen AI products at all. 2 is why data professionals should be very involved in building those profit-generating LLM products. 3 is how you go about successfully executing on an AI product. And then finally, how you can get involved, if you aren't already, as a data professional in the projects that are going to generate dollar signs and your executives are going to be excited about. Before that, some quick background and some reasons why you might want to consider listening to what I have to say. So I've been working in machine learning for over a decade now. I'm currently head of data and AI at Newfront, leading both internal analytics and externally facing, client-facing data and AI products. Newfront's a multi-billion-dollar Series D commercial insurance broker. We help our clients who are businesses with managing their risk, protecting their balance sheet, and getting their people great employee benefits. Before Newfront, I was at Google for several years where I ran a couple AI teams. My teams have delivered dozens of ML and AI products into production that generate dollar signs for senior leadership. And one thing that's interesting to note, though, at Google was that my AI teams were fully consisting of just software engineers, like SWEs. 0 data scientists, 0 data engineers. And what I'm here to tell you today is that there's a better way to do it, and it involves you. In fact, our cross-functional approach at Newfront, involving data professionals in the process alongside software engineers, has been pretty successful. Even with a small team, we've been able to deliver 4 Gen AI products into production that has hundreds of our clients using. And ultimately, what matters most is that they generate direct ROI for the business, in this case, millions of dollars of new business revenue for the company. Before I dive too much into why data professionals should get involved, I first want to make sure that we're all aligned as to why it makes sense to work on Gen AI at all. So as I alluded to, it's all about how your function gets viewed by leadership. Now, most data teams are viewed as a cost center, as a decision support function. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Cost centers are critical. IT is a cost center, and you can't live without it. However, like I mentioned, in a tight market, it's really hard to justify increased investment. And that's because, in my opinion, it's very difficult, in fact, unreasonable, in order to quantitatively measure the value of decision support. You just can't do it reliably. On the other hand, it's very reasonable to measure how many dollars that you're winning for your business or how many dollars you're directly saving because of your initiatives. Now, Gen AI, in my opinion, the good Gen AI products are the ones that help reorient you towards that profit center mode. It's not the only way to reorient your data team towards profit center. You could operationalize your analytics as well, or you could build client-facing analytics products. But Gen AI is definitely in that category. So why then do Gen AI instead of those other types of profit-generating initiatives? I'm curious if anyone has a thought as to what the most disruptive thing that ChatGPT brought to the world. Any thoughts? UX, awesome. I was about to put a plant, and I promise I've never met you before. UX, I think it's a close second. This is how I have built ML products across my career. This model's worked really successfully for me. It's this multi-step process, though, of identifying a good problem to work on, collecting high-quality training data, making sure that training data is high quality, making sure you understand the domain deeply, prototyping a model, making sure that it's hitting enough performance metrics in order for you to go live, then putting it into production, creating the MLOps structure around the model so that it's not drifting over time, and maintaining it. It works really well. Like, I've done this dozens of times. But what I've learned is that it's expensive, and it takes a long time to get through this whole thing. You know, high-quality training data, expensive and really hard to get. ML expertise, expensive and hard to get. And then ML ops expertise in order to build the pipelines around your model, you guessed it, expensive and hard to get. With all this stuff that's expensive and time-consuming, the ROI picture of ML initiatives gets a little bit harder to sell. This is what Gen AI has disrupted. Essentially, you're able to shortcut some of the most expensive and time-consuming aspects of the ML product lifecycle. You no longer need that high-quality training data. You no longer need that deep ML expertise on your team. And Anthropic and OpenAI have already scaled out the APIs that you're going to hit, so you don't have to do as much maintenance. And that is ultimately what gets executives excited, because you have now increased the ROI of your product by taking something that usually takes quarters of time to do, and now you're able to do it in months, sometimes even weeks. So it's all about ROI, and that's why Gen AI is so exciting to executives, at least in my opinion. Everyone convinced? Good. Let's move on. So who should be involved in building Gen AI products? As I mentioned before, my teams at Google were fully software engineers. Some had ML suffixes at the end, but they were all SWEs. And that was always a bit odd to me. And now, in Gen AI land, the sentiment really hasn't changed that much. You no longer need that ML engineer. It's helpful, but there's not that many of them. And so there's this new concept of the AI engineer, who is the one who's building your LLM product, building the pipeline, doing the prompt engineering, making sure that it runs and goes live. And the sentiment when I talk to other AI leaders in the space is that most of those engineers are going to be a shift left from software engineers. Namely that with everything behind an API, why can't a software engineer just go call that API and build a product around it? Now, I think this is a really good observation. I think first made by Alessio and Swix over at Latent Space. But I do think it misses a deeper opportunity to have a more cross-functional team building an LLM product consisting of data people shifting right from the data-constrained space over into AI engineering land. And in fact, this is what has driven much of the success that Newfront has had with building AI products, is this combination of SWEs and data professionals accelerating our time to market and ensuring we still build a robust product for our clients. So why is that? Why does it matter to have data professionals building? Why can't you just do it with SWEs? It all comes down to the skill sets that you need in order to effectively execute against an AI product. I call it the 3 E's of AI product development. The first E is for experimentation, which consists of iterating through hypotheses as quickly as possible in order to improve the performance of your LLM product. Here, speed and performance are king. The second E is for evaluation. This is all about robustness and trust. Do your users trust that your LLM product is working as intended? Do they have trust in what the AI is saying? You probably have seen a bunch of big fails in the AI space over the last year. My contention is that most of those big fails could have been prevented with more robust offline evaluation and testing. And finally, the last E is for engineering. You still can't go live without productionizing your AI product. Having a prototype and just staying there is not going to drive value, or it's going to fall over in production or become an unmaintainable mess. So, all right, these 3 E's, probably not the most groundbreaking way to frame how the skill sets are needed in AI development, except for maybe the beautiful alliteration of it. But what I find more interesting about this framing is that you can clearly make a proposal that data professionals fit really well into 2 out of the 3 E's that are required to deliver an AI product successfully. For experimentation, I think they make really great foils to a software engineer. Software engineers tend to have a mindset of building things right the first time, which doesn't, as we'll go into, doesn't really work out that well in AI land. And data professionals instead have a fail-fast mentality of let's prototype something quick and dirty before we go live with it. And then on evaluation, I think it's pretty obvious why data people are good here, so not going to go into too much there. And also, just wanted to point out that when I do say data professionals, I do mean pretty much every data role. I'm not just talking about data scientists with some ML background. We have analytics engineers and analysts also working on AI products at Newfront. All right, so that was a quick intro. I want to make this a little bit more concrete with a real-world product that we've built at Newfront called Benji. So Benji is Newfront's flagship AI product. It's an LLM-powered chatbot that we deploy in our clients' Slack workspaces to deflect questions away from those clients' benefits and people teams. They don't want to answer, the 100th question about do I have pet insurance, or what's my medical deductible, or where the heck's my ID card. And so Benji intercepts those questions and responds to employees directly. We've been live with Benji for, I think, a little over a year now, and it's driven millions of dollars of incremental revenue for Newfront, and people teams love it. Employees tend to love it as well. So first things first, though, you need to make sure that AI is a good fit for your problem. Across my career, I've seen this massive, massive anti-pattern of people taking AI and just jamming it into a problem space. And that never works out, in my experience. Usually that user ends up in solving a toy use case that doesn't actually drive impact, or because it's not a good fit for the technology, it just doesn't work. And it becomes like a marketing tool as opposed to an actual product that's valuable. Benji is a good fit for AI for a few reasons. First and foremost, it's a good tech fit for the problem. LLMs are really good at taking in language, understanding it, retrieving it, and summarizing it. So it's a good fit. It's pretty straightforward to evaluate. If you look at the output of Benji, you can basically grade whether or not it did what it was supposed to do very easily. And then finally, it's not a toy use case. This is an active problem that our clients face day in and day out. They really don't like the low-value work of answering those first line of defense questions. And so being able to save them time and focus on more strategic work is very enticing to them. I've literally been on prospect calls where a VP of benefits is near on the verge of tears because she knows how much time this is going to save her team. And ultimately, it comes down to the ROI, the revenue, right? If you're solving a client pain point, you're likely going to be able to generate revenue pretty directly off of it. All right, on to how we structured the team, the Benji working group. So there's two parts to Benji. There's the intelligence portion and the product portion. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the way employees interact with their benefits is very multi-channel. You have folks who ask questions in Slack and email, et cetera. And so we've taken a multi-channel approach for building the product. I want to focus on the intelligence standpoint, though. Over time, the staffing has changed a bit on how we've staffed up this team. But on average, it's been pretty lean, and it's consisted of 2 data professionals and 1 software engineer. And sometimes it's been as little as 1 data professional and 1 software engineer with the support of a PM. And it's been pretty successful. You don't want a singleton for all the reasons you don't want a singleton on most anything. And as we'll go into, having that diverse skill set really helps accelerate getting to market quickly. As for what Benji actually is, I'm not going to use this time to talk about RAG that much, but Benji is a standard retrieval augmented generation application, or RAG. The basics are an employee asks a question in a Slack channel. Benji reads the question, looks up the most semantically relevant information from a document that we have stored for that client, takes that semantically relevant context, combines it with the question, shoots it off to an LLM provider, gets the answer back, and surfaces it to the employee. Pretty straightforward. Except, maybe not that straightforward. You can't really just write a wrapper around ChatGPT and expect it to work super well. We did start pretty simple, but eventually this is the architecture we landed on. It's a little blurry on purpose, but it essentially goes from question understanding to retrieval to re-ranking to answer synthesis to guardrails to citation of sources. It's a very lengthy pipeline. And we started with something simple, but this is where we ended. Because, as I mentioned before, trust from your users is super important, and we found that we needed all of these different steps, at least for Benji, in order to get high enough precision to build that trust with our users. So that brings me to why a diverse skill set matters so much in effective AI product development, and my 3 E's. Given the complexity of that pipeline, you could probably imagine that there are lots of levers to pull and knobs to turn in order to increase the performance of your application. Which brings me to experimentation, the first E. As a reminder, experimenters are there to improve performance of your model as quickly as possible, which involves iterating on lots of hypotheses. And so there's 2 areas that an experimenter should be laser focused on. One is identifying fruitful experiments to run, and the other is failing fast on experiments that are eventually not going to actually work out in reality. For the first, anyone can get involved here, right? All you need is really a curiosity about AI and a curiosity about what the data is saying about your pipeline. If the data is saying that this part of the pipeline is performing poorly, you'd probably focus on that part of the pipeline. And so that lends itself to a data professional, somebody who knows how to dig into the data. And as for failing fast, as I alluded to earlier, software engineers tend to build things right the first time. which is an anti-pattern in AI development. If you're going to spend a month building some experiment that you think is really going to work out, and then it doesn't work out, you just wasted a month. And so being able to get to that failure of an experiment quickly is super important, because ahead of time, you might think it's going to work out, but even the experiments I think are going to work out, half the time they don't. And so data professionals, I'm a big proponent, especially of analysts, that having a fail-fast mentality, being able to pivot to what the data is telling you, is a crucial attribute of any good analyst or data professional. And so they make a great foil to software engineers in this space. On Benji, I think once we really adopted this mentality of failing fast, we essentially doubled the number of experiments we were able to run. And nowadays, I think some of our experiments are getting to that decision point on, is this going to be working out or not, in a couple of hours, which is a lot different than a lot of teams I see out there. Another fun side note is that, and another piece of evidence as to why data professionals should be involved, is two of our most successful experiments. I think number 1 and number 3 all time of our best experiments were very data related. One was semantically chunking up our data in a more relevant way for Benji to interact with. And the other was improving how we retrieve that data. Case in point. All right, the second E, evaluation. Evaluation is really tied to the first. You can't run experiments and know if you're doing well unless you have trust in the metrics of what the experiment's saying. As I mentioned before, too many companies are just YOLOing LLM products into production without doing an evaluation, and this is how they're getting into trouble. For an evaluator, the first thing you should do is define your metrics. This should be bread and butter for everyone in this room. The way we do it is probably the way a lot of you would do it, which is you start with the business outcome you're trying to drive and work backwards from that. For Benji, we're trying to deflect questions away from people teams. And so that means what we're trying to drive is time savings for those teams. Can they spend less time on this low-value work and more time doing high-value strategic work? And so time savings is our ultimate KPI that we're trying to drive. Working back from that KPI, we identified 2 input metrics, recall and precision, that we felt we were able to tie very closely to time savings. So recall in this case just means, is Benji able to answer the questions that we think it should be able to answer? And then precision is our guardrail here. We don't want Benji answering questions that it doesn't know how to answer, i.e. like hallucinating an answer. That's very bad failure mode. We want to avoid that. And so those 2 metrics, our data scientists came up with pretty quickly, nailed them. That's why you have a data professional involved. And he also did something that I think is really important for an evaluator, which is assembling a robust offline evaluation set that mirrors your production data very closely. Because there's a lot of benchmarks out there, and a lot of them are bad. And making sure that your offline metrics mirror what production's going to be is super critical. So we're updating this eval set pretty continuously. When Benji gets a question that it answers poorly, straight to the eval set. So having this robust evaluation set, pretty critical. And quick call out to DBT here. Like, it gives us a lot of comfort in shipping a new experiment to production. It acts as a basic CI step to make sure that that our production is not actually degrading when we go live. All right, the final E is for engineering. And to be honest, this is where data professionals do struggle a bit. With the rise of DBT and the analytics engineer, I feel like the data profession has grown a lot in terms of understanding engineering patterns and best practices, but we still struggle a bit with online systems and building real-time online systems. At least some of us do. And this is why we still want to have a software engineer involved, especially with the complexity of a pipeline like Benji's. We want to make sure it's reliable and doesn't fall over in production. That said, Our data professionals are contributing to our production code base on a daily basis, and I don't think that's possible without having a background in the analytics engineering space for the last several years. All right, so that's how we built Benji in a nutshell. A few takeaways. Make sure that you work on a use case that is impactful, preferably client-facing, but something that is a step function change in your cost savings is also very valuable. Taking an approach to experimentation of failing fast is really important to improve your time to market, which goes back to the ROI case. Got to get there quickly if you're going to have a big ROI. Make sure you have an eval-first approach to AI product development. Don't skimp on evaluation. It's not that hard. You just need to take the time to do it. And then finally, assemble a cross-functional team so that you both have a robust product and you get to market quickly. All right, so with a few minutes left, I think, I want to give a call to action to especially the data leaders in the room. You can get involved in AI products, especially the client-facing ones too, if you aren't already. If you are, great. I sit in our product and engineering organization, so it was relatively easy for me and my team. But if you don't, you should be really fostering that relationship with your VP of Eng or Chief Product Officer or similar. It's going to pay off here, and it probably will pay off in other projects as well. I'm looking at you, schema changes. And this is how I would go pitch it to your Chief Product Officer or VP of Eng. I'd focus on the 2 E's, experimentation and evaluation. As we've learned, data professionals make for pretty great experimenters, especially as a foil to software engineers. We move quickly. We're happy to prototype. We get to that failure point quickly, which is a good foil to an engineer who wants to build it right the first time. And then obviously, data professionals are great at evaluating. And I would contend that eval is the hardest and most important part of building an LLM product. And you can quote me on that. So that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you, Coalesce. I appreciate it. I'm really excited about AI, as you can probably tell. So come talk to me. Love to chat about it. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Newfront's hiring. So if folks are interested, come give us a check. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was great. I'll warm us up. I'm sure lots of people have questions. So you mentioned that Gen AI is beneficial because you can get rid of that whole expensive training data set creation. But then you also still have to have like an evaluation data set. Any tricks or tips for how to assemble that? Because that can be almost as painful and expensive as the training data.
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes it can be pretty expensive to gather, but in our experience, you don't really need that many examples to evaluate. If you think about, I used to work in large language models before it was cool at Google, and you know how many examples you have to gather in order to train a model? It's billions, to be honest. And for our eval sets, we're talking about 100 examples maybe for Benji. And so it's still expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. It is expensive in terms of it takes time to really go find the right questions that you want to be incorporating in order to make sure your eval set represents production. So it is kind of expensive. What we found that's beneficial is not starting with just like real upfront collection. We like to dog food our products. And so we went live at Newfront like a year and a half ago, and we captured a bunch of questions that people were actually asking, and we incorporated those and expanded our eval set really quickly. And so dog fooding is a way to skip the upfront eval, whereas you can't really do that with training data. Great question. Thank you. Yes?
So you had a simple example of a RAG agent. What do you think about like buy versus build? Like building out yourself internally, you have to make a team. They're probably really expensive. You guys started a year ago, so you guys had like to figure out all the intricacies. And like if you started today and you figure out all the intricacies of RAG, it would take you a year, and your product will like come out in a year. But there are a lot of product solutions out there, like Glean or something, that could do something very similar. So what's your take on that?
Great question. So if I understand correctly, like what build versus buy. So we started working on Benji at a hackathon April of 2023, and we went live internally 3 months later. So pretty quick time to market there, and like we had no infra, we had nothing. We were starting from scratch essentially, and we didn't really like dedicate too much time up front. So I don't think the barrier to entry, especially for RAG applications, is that hard to build internally. Glean is a great product. I think you shouldn't be building AI for like, let me search my internal documentation of my team, and like Glean fits that really well. I don't think you're going to be building a wrapper around Glean and selling it to a client. Maybe some folks are. It seems a bit odd to me, but for internal use cases, yeah, I don't think we would ever prioritize trying to build a competitor to a Glean. For those who aren't familiar, I think Glean is like a enterprise search tool, right? Yeah, and so I wouldn't be focusing on that type of use case. We'd be focusing on use cases that there is no really buy option out there. The buy options are like platform things, like like a LangChain or a Llama Index to help accelerate things, but there's nothing really off the shelf that we could buy that would be a Benji replacement. So focus on the external use cases or things that are specific to you, and for accelerating your internal workforce, there's plenty of things like Glean that you can buy.
So you said that the driver for these should be making an ROI case. In this case, I think the return was 4 weeks of people ops save time, and you're investing a fairly complex pipeline of engineers and data people. How do you kind of square the circle there?
So yeah, we're saving up to 4 weeks of time for our clients' people teams. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients, and so when you add it up across the board.
Gotcha. So this scales across.
Yeah, so we deploy it for all of our clients who want it. We will deploy it to those client workspaces.
Gotcha. So the eval sets, for example, don't have to be very carefully curated per client. It generalizes fairly well.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because we are careful with different clients, because when we go to a new client workspace, we're including their benefits guide, their employee handbook, their FAQ. And so we don't just kind of toss the data into Benji and expect it to work right out of the gate. We do have a set of 40 or so questions that are commonly asked that we run through every single time before deploy, and make sure that that deployment of Benji is working for that client before we go live. So there is a bit of a deployment phase where we take a day in order to make sure that it's working out with our operations team.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off that, what actions can you take? How can you change the system when you find, issues in the eval set?
Yeah, good question. So what can we do if, for example, we're going to deploy with one of our clients and it comes back and precision's 80%, and we have a threshold that says if it's not above this, we're not going to deploy. What do we do there? There's really 2 steps. One is, and this is the most common one, is we look at the documents, and most of the time the documents are missing something. And so we go back to the team, our service team, our benefits management team. They're the ones who create the documents, which is nice. It's a very big upside for this product. And they can go and in an hour, update the document, we rerun it through Benji, and lo and behold, performance increases because the data's right. The other step, if it's not a document thing, which I don't think we've seen in 50 deployments now, is we would take that, we would pause the deployment, we'd spend some cycles learning why it's not working, and then we'd build in one of those many steps in the pipeline in order to solve for that. So that hasn't happened in a while because we've been working on this for a year and a half now, but at the beginning it might be a little bit slow for certain use cases.
Hi. You mentioned about implementing LLMs on the user-facing products, right? Like Benji. So when you launched it, did you see a novelty effect when users are either using more and then it goes down, like they want to go back to the old system, or it's has been really good adoption?
Yeah, really great question. Definitely there's a novelty effect, for sure. I think that's pretty consistent. And then for some of our clients, the usage is relatively low. for a lot of our smaller clients. A lot of our clients have really good other resources, or they're really good about finding their benefits guide and searching it, or they have a Strive site where they have the resources they already need, and so it's not that impactful. But for a lot of clients, you see a pretty consistent usage across time. And the ones that you find pretty consistent usage across time are from the clients whose benefits teams are struggling the most, which is very empowering to see. Is like, okay, so we build this for this client, and it's not getting usage, but their benefits team isn't underwater. For the clients whose benefits teams are, it tends to be a place where employees are engaging because they're getting answers more quickly, and they hadn't gotten the support that they needed beforehand. So definitely a novelty effect, but it is client dependent.
Okay, thanks.
Right. And then how are you guys routing between those models?
Yeah, great question. So currently, I think the full Benji pipeline, every step is using Sonnet 3.5 today, but we had been using GPT-4 for a year before that, and it's an experimentation and evaluation question, right? Like, new model comes out, immediately within the next week, we've already tested, does the model perform better on these different steps of the pipeline, or does it not? And so like we learn in our offline metrics pretty quickly whether we should consider making the move or not. For something as big as a model change, we take extra time to make sure that there's no regressions, because it's not as straightforward as just switching from GPT-4 to Sonnet 3.5. You have to change your prompts. You need to make sure that like the really hard questions are still being answered correctly. So it takes a little bit more work for something as big as a change as that. But if you have that experimentation culture and you have the right metrics, it's not that hard to switch something up.
Because from that graph, I thought you guys were like real time switching.
Oh, no. We've considered that, but we haven't done it yet. I don't think we've seen the value in doing it quite yet. But I think I know of a few teams who are kind of having like a fallback mechanism.
Hey. Is Benji core to your business workflow, or at some point do you replace this with an out-of-box solution outside? I'm just wondering, is it sustainable for you to keep maintaining this in-house?
As opposed to somebody builds like a Benji as a product?
Yeah, like maybe there is horizontal leverage from a solution outside for similar companies building, and they might be faster. But obviously, is this core to your business or not? That could be a guiding factor, but just wondering.
Yeah, ultimately, we're a benefits broker on this side of the business, right? Our core part of the business is making people teams look really good by getting great benefits for their employees and negotiating with their CFO, like on the cost benefit of their benefits program. And we also help our benefits team make sure they can get through open enrollment well, and make sure that they're servicing their employees correctly. So I don't know if I call it core to the business, but it is definitely a very big part of our offering that we offer to all of our clients. Now, as to if there's somebody else who's going to come in and build a benefits-specific chatbot that our clients would use, if that's what our clients want, great. The good thing about working at Newfront is it's part of our core offering, so we're not really selling this as a standalone product, and so we don't have to worry about the pricing stuff. Like where we see the increase in revenue is by winning clients over because they've never seen anything like this before. That's how we win business off of Benji, is like they come because we have Benji, not buying in a standalone additional Benji. So if somebody else makes something that's better than ours and a client of ours wants to use it instead, we're very happy to say, here you go. We just haven't seen that yet in the market.
Got it. Thank you.
Time, we good? We're all done? Well, thank you everyone for coming to the talk. Thank you for the questions as well.